what does Garner BioSolutions do in simplest terms?
Okay, so we are a human biosample collection company. Biosamples are anything like
So, how is the rise of precision oncology and the targeted therapies shaping the need of your clients? Welcome to Life Science Insights Podcast. I'm Sandal Karnanidhi, and today we are diving into innovation, data, and market trends in oncology and how we connect to the company's mission in this critical field. Our guest for today is Poojan Suri, CEO of Garner BioSolutions, a company focused on acquiring high quality biospecimens to accelerate oncology research and improve patient outcomes. Welcome to the show, Poojan.
thank you.
So, let me start with my first question. What inspired you to start Garner BioSolutions and what problem were you determined to solve?
Um, so thanks for having me, Spencer. What inspired me to start Garner Bio? I have been a researcher for majority of my life, and a huge part of the research projects I was working on required sampling of human clinical, like basically acquiring human clinical samples. And so I was a consumer of now what I'm selling for a very long time. And there were a few issues that came along the way that made me think that, oh, here's a gap that needs fulfilling. First was just the availability of
Mm.
samples, especially with rare diseases. Second was expense and budget. So a
Okay.
lot of times the samples that were available were very expensive.
Okay.
Third was if we went the academic partnership route, we always struggled with lengthy legal contracts and questions around IP sharing and paper and who's going to write the paper and authorship and things like that. And so for a company, from a commercial point of view, those are big disadvantages. And so I often felt that there should have been an easier way to get samples in a more affordable way, faster way. And then, of course, the kind of diseases we were working in, we were not able to get enough racial representation. So we were studying a completely different racial population from the one that we perhaps had to treat. And so there were several such disparities that led me to identify here's a gap, the need to get more racial representation, the need to make the process of acquiring samples easier, more affordable, faster, and really empower the scientists. And so that was sort of what drove me to start the company.
Okay. That's interesting. So, can you share the story behind the name Garner BioSolutions? Does it hold any special meaning?
Uh, no, except no special meaning, just looking for something that, simple to understand, garner, to collect. And so that's sort of what we do. We procure human clinical biosamples for research purposes. And we kept biosolutions because at the time we were thinking that there might be potential to do more than just collect samples. There might be potential to start a lab and do research and provide other sort of ancillary services within the same field. And so we didn't want to limit ourselves just to samples. And so that's why it was Garner BioSolutions.
Okay. Does Garner BioSolution do what does Garner BioSolution do in simplest terms?
Okay, so we are a human biosample collection company. Biosamples are anything like saliva, hair, nails,
Okay.
blood, serum, urine, anything that you derive from a patient or a healthy donor is a biosample.
Okay.
And what we do is we work with hospitals to collect these biosamples under an informed consent, and we provide it for research and development to companies across the globe. And so, a lot of times, when scientists want to do either some form of therapeutic development or disease discovery or diagnostic development, we have to study these. We basically have to study the disease in an actual human being before we can develop. And so that's where we come into play.
Okay. Nice. Since you're in the oncology sector, let me ask you this. What would you describe the current state of the oncology market in terms of research, innovation, and commercialization?
So I think a huge, we both met at AACR, so there were many big trends emerging. AI is definitely one of the biggest trends emerging, and the use of AI in
Okay.
diagnostic development. So how do we detect cancers early? How do we detect cancers in a minimally invasive way? Are there certain proteins or biomarkers or enzymes in our body that can indicate that this person is going to get cancer and in how much time, right? And
Okay.
so um, there's, AI, there's a lot of different therapeutics, precision medicine, where you understand the precise biology of a disease subset in certain patients, and then you just treat that population. So, for example, um, it's not a one drug fits all. It's a one drug for a very specialized type of cancer. And so there are various such technologies that are coming in that deal with unique and rare patient populations with AI and early diagnostics. I think that's a really big area of innovation coming up.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. So, how is the rise of precision oncology and the targeted therapies shaping the need of
Yeah.
your clients?
Yeah, so that's a very good question because as the therapies are getting more and more precision or personalized, um, there's more and more requirement for sampling from patients,
Okay.
but we need to get more clinical information. So it's not just enough to know that this person has, for example, lung cancer. We need to know the stage, the grade, when the disease onset happened. We need to know family history. We need to know treatments. We need to understand the genetic profile. Are there certain mutations um, that lead to predispositions? And so, what is happening more and more is that companies like us are now bridging the gap and providing access to patients with that kind of clinical profile. So, we're not just giving you sample from lung cancer patient, we're also giving you medical information from those patients so you can then understand disease progression. And we're giving you access to those patients so that you can perhaps sample them over time. Perhaps you can study before and after they receive therapy, so on and so forth.
Yeah, nice. So, let me ask you a few questions on the market segment. How do emerging
Mhm.
markets or underrepresented population factor into the demand of biospecimen diversity?
Okay, so um, I think that this is one of the things that Garner Bio is actually trying to solve because there are emerging biobanks in different countries that for far too long have dominated. So, for example, being able to study the Caucasian population
Mm.
is by far the easiest because they are so readily sampled. They come from developed nations where this infrastructure exists, this sampling biobanking infrastructure exists. And so a lot of therapies have been developed by studying this population. Where we come in is we are trying to give global access. So we're saying we're not just sourcing from the US, we're sourcing from outside, we're sourcing from developing countries. Like we're sourcing from India, we're sourcing from Bangladesh, we're sourcing from Armenia, we're sourcing from Turkey. And so we're creating this landscape where there is potential for researchers to study more than one population racially. We're sourcing from Africa as well. So what we're doing is allowing equity for all the different types of races to come on board
Mm.
and be a part of the research as early as preclinical level, right? So, and that I think is very important because as the therapies are getting more and more specific and more advanced, there is a huge racial component that will ultimately play a role in the effectiveness of these therapies. And it's important for us to study not just the population that is readily available here in the US, but also the populations of the world.
Right. So, and Asia is a big market for the biospecimen, right? So, a lot of the specimen comes from the Asia market, right?
Mm-hmm. It depends. So, at least a lot of times that what we have seen with our customers is that infectious disease, they're very open to taking samples from Asia,
Okay.
and likely so because of the prevalence. But then there are other types of areas like, for example, Oncology is one where there is some mismatch in processes with which samples are collected in different countries. And so they may be more hesitant to get samples out of Asia for that reason. And so what we have actually seen is often people in some areas, Asia is very prominent, and in some, they
Some
stay back.
area.
Also the technology and the diagnostic, like what is required for a clinician to diagnose lung cancer in, for example, Asia would be different to the level of detail required here in the US by virtue of therapies. Because in the US, we have highly specific therapies, and so we do all these different kinds of biomarker and genetic tests. But in a country like India, not every hospital has the capability. A lot of them just do chemotherapy radiation. And so they don't need to go down that path of
Yeah.
analyzing the type of cancer because it's a very generic treatment. And so that also creates this disparity in
Disparity. Yes.
about why Asian samples, although population is huge, there's a lot of providers, but it doesn't work for everybody, and especially not for our our clients, because they're more focused on really precision therapies, and they're focused on developing new technologies and AI. And so they have very, very niche demands and high quality expectations.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
So, as a CEO, how your leadership principles evolved since founding Garner?
um, so I think I'm still pretty early in my journey as a CEO. My company is not very big. And I think my role is less traditional because a lot of times I'm wearing many different hats. But the one thing I will say, especially in my line of work, because I'm so frequently dealing with people, and my father always says that you have to be a psychologist. So you have to try to understand who you're selling, but also like selling and supplying, right? So I deal
Right.
with suppliers, and they're from different types of countries with different
Right.
cultures and
Mm.
different speaking styles, different styles of doing business. And then I have consumer side, some of them are very demanding. And so I try to be patient and, try to understand the needs on both sides. And
That's
yeah, and for
that's
my
very
small team
important,
of
right?
less than five people, I try to set a good example,
No, that's very
especially
important. You have to listen to the customer. You have to listen to the everyone, right? So, as a CEO,
right. And you have to manage both parties. You have to,
yes,
so a lot of it is less CEO-esque and more people management
people management. You're right.
sometimes.
You're right.
Yeah.
So, this biotech requires both science-driven and the business-minded thinking. How do you build a
Mhm.
team that balances those worlds?
Yeah, so our team is pretty small. I grew the company very lean. And so we mostly have consultants, especially for the very technical scientific parts. Um, how do we balance it? So uh, even I'm learning as the company is evolving, that our customer base is increasing. I think I go consumer first. What is it that the consumer truly wants, right? And sort of try to bring that back into what is the science and innovation that we are servicing, and how does our product and service need to modify according to that. So that's sort of, you know, uh, how I usually approach it.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
So interesting. What major trends do you see shaping the future of biosolutions and synthetic biology over the next 5 to 10 years?
So major trends, AI is definitely one of them. AI, especially in spatial imaging for microscopy, disease diagnosis is huge. And like I mentioned earlier, minimally invasive sampling. So for right now, the routine is you take a biopsy where you take a tissue biopsy, a needle core biopsy, and then a pathologist reads it to determine whether it's cancer or not. Now they're
Okay.
moving to liquid biopsy where they sample blood, which
Mm.
is much less invasive, and then they run it through whatever technology they're developing to identify, markers of cancer. And so I think those are two emerging areas. And then, of course, there is gene therapy with CRISPR. There's, some success with treating newborns with genetic disorders early on. And I think that's a really big trend is gene therapies.
We recently saw that in the
Um,
news, right?
yes, yes. And that's why
That's why.
yeah, and a lot of our consumers are focused on getting samples with where they can actually get good molecular integrity, like they can extract DNA, RNA from like a tumor tissue or blood, and then study that because they're developing solutions for genetic-based cancers mostly. So.
Okay, okay, cool. Is there any AI or automation transforming your R&D pipeline or any operations?
So not for us. We
Okay,
don't
okay.
use
You don't use,
any
right?
heavy rope because so the way we get our samples is we work with hospitals. So we actually need at the ground level, um, we work with the clinician. So we need the clinician to identify which patients might be suitable for our collection project. And
Mm.
then we need a person to speak to that patient, explain what the project is, the purpose, ask for their consent, and then draw the blood. So until you have robots drawing people's blood,
Yeah,
we don't really have
any
uh,
automation, I
any
understand.
automation over there. It's still very personal experience.
I believe you don't use IT also, right? It's more of paperwork, right?
So no, IT is important because when you're running these collection projects, you do need like a LIMS system to track all the sampling. So yes, we do require that softwares that are HIPAA compliant and have all of the safety regulations in order to preserve this medical information because we cannot just disclose it so there's all sorts of protocols and softwares for that, for the data side of things. Um, and then tracking sample collection, processing, sold, archived, things like that. But not so much. And then, of course, the processing side, diagnostic labs have lineups of how they process tissue and blood and things like that. So, but us as Garner, because we source supply, we are not really focused
Okay,
on automation as much.
automation, yes. My
Yeah.
next question on the ethical.
Okay.
What what regulatory or ethical considerations do you think will
Yeah.
become more important in biotech in the near future?
Everything I think is already important. But there is huge emphasis now on, letting the patient know, reassuring the patient that all of their personal information is safeguarded, right? That if their sample is being used by a researcher, their identity is hidden. Um, we also have to let the patients know that there is a possibility that there will be a commercial outcome for some company because at the end of the day, this is a commercial transaction. We are a for-profit company. So we have to clarify that the samples, although donated, may have a commercial outcome that may not be linked back to the patient. We do have to reassure them that their DNA is not going to be used or shared with any third party without their consent outside
Oh,
of
okay.
what's
Okay.
already
Mm,
determined by our contracts for a particular project.
mm,
And so
mm.
there's a lot of sensitivity around identity, DNA identity, medical history, being able to contact the patient again, commercial use. A lot of countries actually don't allow in the regulations for using these samples for any kind of genomics or genetic work because um, it's still a very sensitive area. And so those are the things that we have to either include, exclude, and if it's included, then we have to really explain to the patient what that truly means. And of course, the most important part is that we have to tell the patient that if they decline to give their sample, there is
Samples,
no negative impact on their treatment. It is,
treatment, yes. Yeah,
of
that is very
course,
important, right?
yes. Um, because sometimes, especially,
Okay. Mm.
in sometimes patients are scared and they're not fully sure. And so that's the whole reason why it has to be a really personal experience in a not so intimidating environment to really get that consent.
It's more of a personal question. Who are the mentors shaped your journey as a founder and leader?
Okay. Um, I think my experience, I worked at one of the biotech companies for a very long time before I left and started this company. And I think that I met some amazing scientists and researchers there. My manager, Setu, I think professionally, I learned a lot. Also, because it was a young startup environment, there was a lot of transparent accessibility to C-suite executives, even as an entry-level employee, as a new graduate. So I think my entire experience at that company has, with all those people, and they're still part of my network. I still call them and ask for guidance and brainstorm. I think all of the mentors I met there, all the directors, the researchers, scientists, everybody I met there, really, really shaped everything I know about research. And then, of course, I think one of the biggest influences has been my father, who himself has been a
Yeah.
businessman
Oh,
and sort of
that's
grew up, yeah, sort of grew up around him with
mm,
everything. Although nothing to do with science, he's a
mm.
completely different field, but I think there's so many things I learn from him every single day. I think he's just, one call away. So I think he's probably the biggest influence. And then after that, professionally, I have a circle of mentors that, sort of trained me and have seen my entire journey from intern to CEO.
And moreover, right, when your father is a
Yeah.
business, a lot of dining table conversation will happen around that context, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and I think I've also firsthand seen his risk-taking ability, his decision making. Um, Anytime I'm faced with a challenge where I think, oh, this is the end of the world, for him, it's just a drop in his experience, right? In his bucket of experience. And so really brings in that perspective. Um, and also his business is similar to mine, where we deal with people from different countries. And so he has that experience of working across different cultures and the expectations and how to navigate being a psychologist.
yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah,
Do you have the habit of reading books? Uh,
I do. Yes. Although I haven't read any in a while, but I do read
okay,
um,
okay. Any
quite a
book
bit. Yes.
recently that changed your perspective?
Oh, actually, I've just been reading so much fiction recently, but I think two books that I have read over time is one's a memoir. It's called Educated. I think it's by T. Westover, Tara Westover. I'm not sure. The book basically, I don't think it changed my perspective, but it's just one of those books that
Some
you
of
read
this.
has a lasting impact on you, just the power of education and relentless grit that
Mm,
can get you anywhere in life. And it's a
okay.
beautiful story
Mm,
of this girl and, how she pursued her education against all odds. And that's just one of those books that stayed with me. And then I often think about the book, The Tipping Point, which analyzes what does it take for people to be successful? What does it take for a Steve Jobs to be a Steve Jobs? Is it just IQ or is it more? I often
more.
think about how they've analyzed um, what it means to be successful, being at the right place at the right time with the right connections, and how
Correct. Mhm.
important skill is, and those are the two books that I really sort of keep thinking about every now and then.
Yeah, nice. Do you listen to any podcast?
No.
Not really, right? Okay.
No, not really.
Yeah. If listeners take away one key message about Garner's mission, what it should be?
Uh, it is truly my mission to make research more accessible and inclusive.
Mm,
I think that for far too long, we have had many different types of races underrepresented in preclinical research. So I'm really hoping that by giving global access to specimens, we're able to bridge that gap and give different countries more equity in preclinical research that is happening. And on the other hand, really to empower the scientists and researchers that you don't have to compromise your project because of a budget or because you can't find the right samples. Really, like we're here to work with you no matter how detailed your project is, so that we can set them up for success in whatever project it is, and also give them easy solutions. Like the samples don't have to be expensive.
Okay.
They don't have to be so difficult to find. They don't have to be, there doesn't have to be a lengthy legal contract or IP sharing. It could be as easy as, I really need to study XYZ population. Can you get me these samples, right? So just sort of serving and empowering the researchers to be able to design their projects, not worrying about things that they shouldn't be worrying about. So making it easy for them.
Okay, nice.
Yeah,
So that's all I have for you today.
sure.
Thanks for the interesting conversations.
Thank you.